When you're putting a shim or something, it's not just about the bottom of the stroke. You should also have enough to clear the top of the stroke. I would go as far as to say that if you can't clear it at the top of the stroke, then in most cases you are better off without a shim. A shim badly prescribed does more harm than a shim well prescribed. A shim is ending up at the hip, meaning if the hip is dropping and then the hip is square because of the shim, that is acceptable. If it is still dropping out of the shim and then the knee is underextending on that side which I put the shim, or plantar flexing less posture, I don't think it's prescribed. Meaning square pelvis is what you want on a seat. You don't want it to be dropping.
Right. As cyclists and triathletes, all of us ride bikes, but not all of us realize the importance of having a bike that fits us well. A good bike fit can mean you are able to ride your bike farther or faster than you ever thought possible without any aches and pains. In this episode, we talk to a bike fitter from Pune, Ronit Debnath. He shares his experience of fitting more than 120 people in a relatively short span of time. He talks about not only his success stories but also his mistakes and what he learned from them. Towards the end of the episode, he also shares what are the things you could do to get a good fit on your bike if you do not have access to a bike fit professional. The initial part of the conversation could feel a bit technical as this mathematics geeks out about various measurements of bike geometry, but give it time to sink in and I'm sure you will find it very useful. Now enjoy the podcast. This episode is brought to you by The Bike Affair. If you are in search of a one-stop destination that caters to all your cycling needs, our today's sponsor, The Bike Affair, is the perfect place to check out. I have known the founders of The Bike Affair, Krish and Gokul, personally for nearly 15 years now. In fact, my first century ride was with Krish back in 2008. They are both exceptional human beings and entrepreneurs that believe in providing exceptional service to their customers. And it shows. With over 14 years of experience, the Bike Affair has established itself as a trusted source offering honest advice and exceptional service. They are offering a special treat for the listeners of this podcast. You can enjoy a 10% discount on your first order by using the code BikeyWenky on their website. So if you are in Hyderabad, visit their store in Kondapur, or if you are anywhere else in India, shop online by using the link thebikeaffair.com. I will leave the link in the show notes. Now, enjoy the podcast. Hi, Ronit. Welcome to the Working Athlete podcast. It's a pleasure having you on the show.
Yeah, very happy to be here. And I guess it's the first time that you have a dedicated fitter on. So, yeah.
Yeah. Definitely first time. But I was very curious about your journey into bike fitting and in bike fitting in general is something that we don't really give ample importance, I think. So that is what I want to kind of, get your insights into that and, a lot of things related to bike fit. But let us start by talking about how you got into bike fitting.
Sure. So full disclosure, I'm not a cycling fanatic. Actually, I'm a football fanatic. But I think I used to be school captain in football, like 11, 12. I used to be good enough, but not good enough to make a living out of it. And I also had a high riding kneecap. So that's called patella alta. High riding kneecap, which is why I got patellar tendonitis, patellar tendinopathy, which is some degeneration of the tendon under the kneecap. So I used to play well from like 15 to like 20 years of age. After that, I had to leave because it was only causing further damage. And then I think in my time in TIF, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, which is in South Mumbai, I saw someone just taking a U-turn on a road bike. And there, this is in 2017. So everything started from there basically. So I didn't know that road bikes were available in India. So then I started Google searching and it never stopped. From there, I started recommending bikes, not for price, just usually from 2018 on. because when I started first bought my road bike, which was a Cannondale Synapse Claris, I didn't see enough good information out there. Because for phones you have MKBHD or Mr. Who's the Boss or whatever, just comparing phones to one to
Right, yeah.
but for bikes, there wasn't comparison. There was just individual reviews, if at all. Bike Radar is very good in that regard, but they were not like back-to-back reviews. So if I want $1,000 bike, which was a Claris, I had a Cannondale Synapse Claris. So they were not like that compared against other bikes in the same category. So I try to fill that gap and help other people make that decision for themselves. That is how I started recommending bikes. Once I started recommending bikes, I understood that bike size names are all subjective. They don't translate into anything, any objective measurement between the brands. And then I understood the bike metrics, the size metrics, bike geometry charts, and I got better at it. And these days, when recommending bikes, even without a jig or something, there are usually very little mistakes, if at all. That time, if I used to recommend like 40, 50 bikes, maybe 2, 3 were of the wrong size, honestly.
But what got you curious into bike sizing and all this?
So one was the lack of resources, basically, of anybody out there to answer someone's questions of what. And I used to be very active on Cyclops then. I'm less active now. That and the fact that I think the advice people were giving, just 54, 52, small, medium, large, they weren't objective recommendations. Or some of the size charts between brands, if you see the same dimension bike, like they are recommended for different size spectrums among brands themselves. So who do you believe? Like so if you look at a Content XS and a Specialized LA49, the last generation rim brake, the Content XS are very similar dimensions. Okay, same stack and the seat tube angle, seat post offset, but they are recommended for wildly different spectrums. Okay, so who would you believe in that case? Would you believe Giant in the case of Giant and Specialized in the case of Specialized? Then you are not believing in anything consistent. If they were like this, then it's consistent among brands, but that isn't the case. That is still not the case.
So they usually there are like small, medium, large, XL or extra small.
Yeah, or 50s.
Yeah, or it is usually 48, 50, 52, 54 kind of sizing. And we usually see that there are like recommended heights based on rider heights and stuff like that. But you tend to fall in this. Okay, there are recommended charts and stuff. Do you think how helpful are they, or how useful are they in your opinion?
Yeah, so the reason, I'll come back to this, the reason I got into bike fitting was that this became slightly boring after a while, and it wasn't using all of the mental capability I have. So I mean, I'm recommending bikes, okay, fine, 5'9", 1 lakh, Giant Content, soda, whatever. That's it. After that, I don't. So I wanted to solve more complex problems within the biking sphere. Bike fitting, it takes up all of your head, basically, and beyond that. So I slowly transitioned into that, and I also felt that in India, at least, there are some people doing really quality stuff, and I have huge respect for them. I try to do that dedicatedly, meaning the people who bike fit, some of the coaches who bike fit are really good. I mean, I have great respect for Joel, Naveen, Chinmay. Srivatsan is a good fitter in Chennai, and some others. I mean, I have great respect for Crankmeister's work as well. But the others are just shop owners who have done a 7-day course, and beyond that, they haven't taught themselves. Just using goniometer and stuff. So I felt I could do quite good once I get a hang of it. So yeah, in bike sizing, the thing is, as I said, I mean, the main theme of buying a bike is to go by measurements, dimensions, not size names. All of these are size names. They don't translate into anything from between brands. whether it's the 52. People think that the small, medium, large can be subjective, but because they are adding a number, it has to be something objective, meaning that it's the length of something, in the bike. That's not the case. Sometimes the seat tube length is measured, but then why would I take it? Because the seat tube length means that the top tube can come like this, or it can just come vertically. But that doesn't mean that the center of the head tube, how far away these reach, and the stack are necessarily different between the two bikes. It just means you have less exposed seat post. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So just that the brand has chosen to take a more horizontal approach to the top tube, versus one has taken something like Giant, sloping like Giant. Canon and CADs, the previous CAD 12s, CAD 10s had very
horizontal top tubes. Yeah.
Some of the aero bikes also have horizontal top tubes. So I'll start with what dimensions you need to look at when buying a bike. Okay. So every measurement, in terms of sizing at least, not in terms of handling, that is trail and wheelbase, I'm not going there. But in terms of sizing, every relevant measurement starts from the bottom bracket. The center of the bottom bracket. If you are watching this, I assume you have passed class 10, so you know Cartesian coordinates, x, y. That's it. That's all you need to know. So the horizontal distance from the center of the bottom bracket to the center of the head tube, the horizontal distance, that is the reach. Just reaching, okay, very intuitive term. And the height is the stack. So the x and y, or the center of the head tube from the bottom bracket, the x is the reach, y is the stack. Okay. I forgot who. So stack is basically you're stacking one thing on top of that's why that term. Now, how can you use this? So suppose you are, let's say 5'9", okay, 100 mm stem is very reasonable. Like, if you are riding a bike with the 80 or 90, whatever. Let's say you're riding a race bike with a 90, you might want to go to 100. You might want to buy a bike with 10 mm shorter reach than the previous one, so that they add up to being the same. So if your current bike has a 390 reach and then you have a 90 stem, you want a 380 reach bike and with a 100 stem, to match the X up to the center of the handlebar.
Okay.
Because you have center of the head tube and then you have the stem length. Assuming you're not using a positive 17, positive 40, no, just a general negative angle stem. I mean, negative 6, negative 7, negative 8, negative 10, up to that. Yeah.
Right.
So as long as you're using reasonable angles, they are close to horizontal, if not completely horizontal. And they will more or less add up to being the same. The handlebar is completely separate, except in one piece cockpits. In terms of stack, if you have a stack load of spaces, like under your stem, you see that you have 4 or 5 spaces. You might want to buy a bike with more stack. So let's say you have 30, 40 mm of spaces. Instead of 40 mm of spaces, you can buy a bike with 20 mm more stack. You will have 20 mm of spaces. Usually bikes are designed to be ridden with stock stem or slightly longer, maybe up to 20 mm longer or 10 mm shorter. And maybe no spacers or one spacer or maximum to 2 spacers. Accommodative. They are not meant to be ridden with in a way. They are just meant to be accommodative. But usually bikes handle better without spacer. Yeah. Okay. So that's the in front of the bottom bracket. I hope it is clear. Is it? Yeah.
Can you go a little slower?
Sure.
And a little, maybe not more layman's terms. Yeah.
So the length from the center of the bottom bracket to the center of the head tube, that is the reach.
Right.
Okay. Then you have the stem after that. What you want is to make the reach up to the contact point, which is the hood.
Correct.
Okay. Assuming the same handlebar, I'm not going to have handlebar reach, that is another thing.
Handlebar width is another
handlebar reach, handlebar width. Anyway, so what you want is to the center where you clamp the stem to the handlebar, to the center of that, you want that to be equal, assuming you are using the same handlebar in both setups. Okay, so the reach of the bike plus the stem length have to be equal.
Okay.
And it has to be reasonable.
Right.
Meaning, if you, as I said, if you have a more or less 5'9" medium-sized person, by international standards, something around 100 stem is what they're equipped by. So if you find yourself like Okay, I will give you an explicit example. If you find yourself on Addict RC, for example, Addict RC is a very long bike by even race bike standards.
Addict RC, Scott Addict.
Scott Addict RC or foil. Okay. And I think, if they have a 390 reach, for example, and you are finding yourself on a unreasonable stem like 80, for example, even for my height, it would be a bit unreasonable on a race bike. I would buy a Super 6 later.
One unreasonable in the sense how?
I would say it's not proportionate to your height. Like for very small people, maybe something around, by very small I mean 5 feet, something around 70. Then maybe for 5'4", 5'5", something around 80, then 5'7", maybe 90 or 100, then
Right.
100, 110. For a 54, 56, then maybe for a 58, maybe 120, something around that.
Okay.
The stem of the bike is there to counteract the trail. So the
Interact the
trail. I mean, the smaller bikes have a shorter. This shorter stem is twitchier, so it's more far out. The wheel is far.
the shorter the stem, the twitchier the
Yes, but the wheel is more far out, and that one counteracts the other. That has a slacker head tube angle.
Okay.
One counteracts the other. Okay. I mean. Let's say you have an Addict RC, you are using an unreasonable stem, let's say 80 on a race bike, you might want to buy a Super 6. It is a race bike with a shorter reach. Conversely, if you are finding like on a Super 6, you are using a 120 or my height just not getting long enough, then you can buy an Addict RC. I think the reach in comparable stacks for the same Y, the reach difference is something around 15 mm.
Right.
And these are two race bikes. So that makes up for a reasonable stem length. Yeah.
Right. So say someone, you are talking about someone having a current bike, and they are looking at a bike that fits them better. You are what you are suggesting is take the fit of the current bike.
Yes,
and
I would not change the fit. If it fits them, I would create it in a better way, more reasonable way in the new bike. Okay. As I said, like if the Scott Addict RC has a 388 reach and maybe 520 stack, I have to see. I think in a 49 it has that. The Super 6 48 has a 520 stack, something around that, and a 374 reach. So you have 14 mm right there. So if you're using 80 stem, maybe 100 mm stem on the Super 6 and a short reach handlebar would do, I think. And that is a better combination. I would say that is a better frame to extension ratio. We are not talking about changing the X and Y of the hoods, okay? We are looking at a better frame to extension ratio than the previous one.
So that it handles better.
Yeah, it will understeer less. It will understeer less when you're descending. So what happens is, instead of let's say, I'm throwing out rough numbers, but instead of a 65-35 weight distribution between the axles, you might have a 60-40. So it will understeer less. But it has to be within reason. That is why I said you shouldn't use on a smaller 120-130. Then it will be too front heavy.
Okay. So let us take a person, who is just getting into biking, cycling, right? How would you recommend he go about picking a correct size and maybe brand also?
In a way, that's very difficult to do without a size cycle. In foreign you have jigs that you just
sizing
jigs wise that you can do in all. But I would say you can see certain markers. If on a bike you sit with a flat torso, that is inherently short, like much longer than a curved torso. See for that cue. If that is the case, then you might need a bike with a longer reach. If you have a high inseam, then look a bike with a higher stack and shorter reach. Because proportionately, as the seat goes up, you want the head tube to go, higher and shorter as well. I mean, otherwise you might have an unreasonable drop to
more stack and shorter reach.
Yes, unreasonable drop to the bar, and because you have a high inseam, your upper body will also be short. So that is accommodated by the reach, and the extra seat height is accommodated by the stack. If you have a high and conversely, if you for example, if you are a racer and you still find yourself not being able to go low enough, and you don't want to use unreasonable negative 17, just a normal stem, then an addict task is very good in a way. So, for example, I have I think relatively short legs. Okay. On my team machine, slammed, I get about 7 centimeters of saddle to bar drop at a 68.5 seat height. The team machine has a 530 stack. Now, if I want to get 9 centimeters of saddle to bar drop, or at least have room to go lower if I can go, the addict task in a 49 has a 512 stack, I think. So that itself is roughly 20 mm.
Right.
I can ride it with 20 mm spacers, or just lower, 520 stack, or just 512.
What is the lowest or the biggest saddle to handlebar drop that is considered reasonable? Because people are.
I think because we don't have 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", it is not constant with heights. Okay, it's proportional to heights, and I haven't fit someone 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". So I don't
Say
think.
for typical median 5'9" kind of person.
I don't see myself going more aggressive than 12, 13 usually. But then, even then, your upper arm is more or less horizontal. Okay. If the length of this changes, you can have more. If this is longer, for example, you can have more bar drop without being more aggressive.
Right.
Just because this is vertical. So same with on a TT bike, you have a saddle to pad drop. Because this is vertical, there are two torsos. Okay. If the forearm is short, but this is long, the torso will be in the but there will just be more pad drop. Although the torso is equally I wouldn't put a number on that, because this growing by 2-3 centimeters might change the equation.
Right. But typically, say around 10 is reasonable for most.
If they're using, definitely, but I like to not use normative ranges at all, actually. In a way.
Right.
That's my philosophy of fitting. So
it depends on person to person. And
so one of the most aggressive I'd seen was Rudra's Well of Studio. So I took it down from 16 or 17 to 13 or 12, something like that.
Right. I mean, I was riding some 13 drop.
That is quite a lot for you.
Quite a lot for me, especially because at my age and my flexibility, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. So you kind of, so when I got a foot, I worked with NJ on that, and he brought me up to like 10 centimeters.
No, 3
centimeters.
Each 5 mm spacer, 6 of them.
Correct.
I have seen your bike.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I could have gone with a bike one size more or with a higher stack.
I think, sorry to interrupt, maybe you were not making completely arbitrary choices, but if someone is making completely arbitrary choices, there are cases where the shorter size is too low and the longer size is too long.
Correct.
The higher size is too long.
Yeah.
You want a bike with the reach of the shorter size but the stack of the longer size.
Yeah.
So instead of hair, you want the bike to be hair, the center of the head tube.
Yeah.
So in that case, you have to make that decision, okay? And you have to go for a completely different bike. So I was talking about a Villiers with one client. I think Villiers L and XL, if I'm not getting the size wrong. And the Super 656 had the stack of the XL and the reach of the L. So the Super 656 was for him. None of the Villiers L within the region. I'm not asking for XL. You can ride with the 80 stem, but why would you?
Yeah.
So none of the or 90 whatever within the region. The Villiers, So I think the Super 6 had some 3 in that size had 385, 388 reach. So the Villiers smaller sizes, but the stag was 555. And the longer size at 400 reach, and the stag was 570 or something. Super 6 had that 388 reach and 574 stag. So in that case, you need the bike inherently to be more relaxed in a way. As per size. So the reach of the smaller size and the stack of the larger size.
Yeah.
It isn't necessary that in every bike you buy, you will have a size that fits you. There are bikes where no size will fit you.
Right.
if you do reasonably, I mean, I can ride a 58 with 50 stem. That is not, not I mean, I ride pretty low, but because of my upper body lie, but anybody, yeah, like, yeah, that is not,
Yeah, it's a bit tricky there when when you are going for a size larger for more stack, and the reach also is going
yeah,
more.
both the X and Y increase.
Yeah.
You have to take, and I would say that, reach is more easy to change than stack. Meaning, if you can't, so I'll tell you one thing. So suppose you are fixed on a bike, ये bike ही लेना है. I will not take any other bike.
Yeah.
There is an assumption made there that if you shorten a stem by over 20, that is the wrong size. I don't think that is the case. So let's say this is stack overlap, okay? This is the smaller size and this is the smaller size slam. This is the smaller size with all spacers. This is the largest size and this is the larger size with all spacers. This is stack overlap. If you are here, let's say somewhere you need the Y where the smaller size, even with all spaces, cannot achieve, then it's a void discussion because you couldn't have gotten that Y with the smaller size anyway.
Right.
So in that cases, even if means that if you need a Y like this, even if it means that you are chopping a stem by more than 20, that is what you would need to get your X and Y. So just because you are chopping a stem by more than 20, let's say whatever the bike is, if you are sold on, it's a completely different discussion that the bike is not for you, which I would say. But if you are sold on that bike itself, and if you need that Y, then yeah, you might as well have to chop the stem by more than 20 in cases.
Yeah. So in general, it is the reach you can play around with a lot.
Not in one-piece cockpits, but
not in one-piece cockpits. Which
then you have to be even. I am not a fan of one-piece cockpits, but as a fitter, I wouldn't be that is in, and fancy riders would be. But yeah.
Nowadays, most high-end bikes are kind of coming with that one-piece.
In case of one-piece cockpits, try to match not only the reach but also the stem length and the handlebar reach. The handlebar reach also comes into account. If you are not one-piece cockpits, I think handlebar reach you can negate and you can just
play around.
Yeah, and hood rotation also. Handlebar reach isn't as static like as a stem length or just a frame length. You can do some hood rotation tricks and get there.
Correct. Excellent. So what are the,
I'll also continue with this. I'll continue behind the bottom bracket. This is usually missed.
Right.
X and Y you are matched in front of the, and all of these are independent of each other. Meaning, if you have the center of the bottom bracket, you cannot take from one and add to other. Because that will change how you pedal. That will change the weight distribution between the axles. So let's say the X dash and Y dash of where the seat is, and where X and in another bike you don't have as much offset to play with. You push the seat front or whatever. X plus 10, X dash plus 10 and X plus 10, whatever. 10 mm forward seat and 10 mm forward. You might have the same like drop to the bar. You will have the same probably reach to the bar, but the pedaling position completely changes. And also what changes is your weight distribution. That will be a more forward bias weight distribution.
Right. Yeah.
So what is once an acceptable handling might go to forward bias. But behind the bottom bracket, there are three metrics I would go for.
In front, there are two metrics.
Yeah, which are
reach and
then I would go for a stem length. Yeah. Behind the bottom bracket, I would look at the seat tube angle and the seat post offset. They have to be looked at in tandem. Okay, and I will also explain why effective top tube is not a good measure. They have to be looked at in tandem, meaning seat tube angle goes like this, and then you have seat post offset. Usually, the effect of those two, usually roughly for the purposes of this, I will not go into the deep mathematics, but 10 mm is worth 1 degree. What that means is 74 seat tube angle and you go 10 mm offset, you could have a 73 and 0 offset. More or less the center of the seat post clamp, just like in front of the bottom bracket, the center of the heat tube is where you focus on. So behind the bottom bracket, the center of the seat post clamp is you have to make sure you have at least 1.5-2 centimeters of buffer though. So meaning you are not running to the limits of the seat post as far as it can go. How do you calculate that? So you have to look at the seat tube length. Then you have to look at how much exposed seat post can be there, and then maybe 4 centimeters. A normal seat stack is 4 centimeters. Okay. So my team machine has I ride a 68.5 seat height. Okay. I would want to make sure that there's at least 70 or 70.5, which there easily is. I have short legs, but in cases of certain trek bikes and some other bikes, the seat post lengths are not the current model, but the previous Imonda. I saw myself changing the seat mass quite often, and the Domanes as well. I think the seat lengths were not seat post lengths were not reasonable enough, and now they are long enough. They have amended that. I mean, as stock, I mean, they have a plus 4 centimeter in both the Domane and the Honda. But what came, so if someone is riding a 54, I would expect a 75 seat height to very easily be achievable. It's not even ridiculously high for a 5'9" person. Sometimes they were not going up with the stock seat mass, which was 135 mm. But so make sure that when your seat tube length, then the amount of seat post that can be, not the total seat post length, but that can be exposed, and the seat height, as the saddle stack, and they add up, and they are at least 2 centimeters over what your seat height is. Yeah.
Okay.
Just so I will explain the seat tube angle and the offset. Okay, so if you have a 75 and a 20 offset, that's like a 73.0 offset, roughly center. And you want the center of the clamp to be more or less not going to the extremes, where you want to saddle rail to be. You want that to be close to not completely metal, but not at the max or the min of the offsets that you would like. And it also is more compliant that way because it's at the middle of the bridge. And it's also, in the case of a bump or impairment, it won't fly off. Less chances of it flying off.
And you bump.
Yeah. So this is less of a problem with 27.2 round seat post bikes, of course, but with proprietary bikes, proprietary seat post bikes, you have to be very careful. Yeah, and usually like you can buy like different offsets later, but they are pretty expensive, 20,000, 30,000.
Right.
Like that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Nowadays, most of the bikes are coming with, at least the top ends are coming with.
All the aero bikes and most of the all-round race bikes. Some endurance bikes come with proprietary, some come with round seat, whatever. Yeah. So what you will do is, if you find yourself, let's say, a seat has about, I'm not going to SMPs, but traditional seat has about 40 mm of rails and it's all the way forward. Next clamp might be like you want to closer to center, so maybe 15 mm. So if you have a 73 and 10 offset, okay, that is a effective. What is the effective seat tube angle? What is the combination of those two? That's the effective seat tube angle. So that would be around 72, 73 and 10 offset. You might want the center of the seat post clamp to go further forward. So that would be an effective seat tube angle. What did I say? 72. So maybe 73.5. So that would be roughly 15 mm forward. So look for a bike with the effective seat tube angle of around 73.5, 74 or 73 even. It would also leave you some room for adjustment. Like if you want to go slightly further back, slightly forward, you would not be at the end range of adjustment. I would also, I have done some work on this with some brands. Like I have emailed BMC, Canyon as well, and Mason as well. I will like to talk a little bit about this. So usually, so this is a bit counterintuitive beyond 5'9", which is that a seat tube angle and an offset, and then the same seat tube angle and larger size offset usually creates a slacker seat tube angle for the smaller size. Which you don't want in small sizes, I think. So if you have a seat tube angle and this offset, and then a seat tube angle and this offset, this is slacker than this. The larger size usually has a steeper seat tube angle. So I had asked like BMC to steepen its seat tube angle in its next model because I felt that the 47 and 51s were too far back, and I always I had posted in a forum as well, and all of them were going forward. Like the center of the seat post clamp was way far off than And I saw other brands using 15 offset, but they were providing a 74 or 74 and a half seat tube angle. BMC was providing a 73 and a half. So I said either provide a zero offset in the 47 and 51 or steepen your seat tube angles. They had considered, and then in the Team Machine R, if you see, they have a 74 and a 10 offset. Okay, in the previous Team Machine, they had a 73.5 and 15 offset. So the center of the seat post clamps are about 10 mm forward.
Interesting.
One more thing is, why do we have offset in the first place? It's usually more compliant. Meaning because it's like this. Okay, so a 74 and a 15 offset will be more compliant than a 72.5 just zero offset. That is why you have.
What do you mean by compliant?
Just more comfortable. So
Okay.
just more give, because it's like this instead of like this.
Right.
It's have some flex. Yeah. Canyon. It's not just my email. I have written with some other fitters of saying. But mine was that it's very small bikes at 20 offset in Endurance. 20 offset, which is too far back usually. 73.5 C2 angle and 20 offset. So I didn't think that those were good numbers. So I just said, if you don't, it's a round seat post, okay, just spec a zero. And there are some other which other fitters have complained about, which I'll come to. In Mason, Data is the manufacturer, like a parts supplier. I mean, handlebars and maybe bar tip or whatever. So I said they also used to have 20 offset options only. I said you should give a steeper option as well, which they did. Then now they have a 12 offset in their menu as well. Standard are the only brand which I think go too steep. I think. Do you know that brand? Standard
No.
Chrysler. So Standard Chrysler has 76-degree seat tube angles. I think that is too steep for most riders. And I also think that like race bikes should come with very slightly steeper seat tube angles than endurance bikes. Meaning maybe 10. So maybe the effective seat tube angle of race bike should be around 73.5, 74. Maybe 74 and a half in very small sizes, and then maybe endurance bikes around 73, just to put more weight into the saddle. This is counterclockwise fit, race bike more clockwise. One more thing is, I talked to this about some big fitters. This might be counterintuitive. So what they say is very small bikes should indeed have very steep seat tube angles. At 5.9 you should have the slackest, and after that it should become steep again, because longer riders, this is their observation. I don't have many 6-footers in India, but this is their observation. Longer riders grow disproportionately in their tibias than femurs. So if you have a tibia that's vertical, femur more or less dictates the offset, but because disproportionately from a 5.9 it becomes more vertical than horizontal, you have to again steepen the seat tube angles, but most brands don't do that. Okay, anyway.
It is a your mathematics background comes into the picture with a lot of these angles and all that.
But yeah, I think when you buy, you should be careful about both and not take away from one to add to the another. So don't do this. About the bottom bracket, both should be satisfied well enough.
Right. Yeah, I mean, just for the listeners, Ronit is a PhD, postgraduate PhD.
Almost done.
He's about to complete a PhD in mathematics. So a little bit technical it can be, but let us try and make it as understandable to the layperson as possible. So you talked about
just
metrics in the front and the back. Canyon are the only bike that don't have stack overlap. Okay, so when buying a Canyon, just for the sake of saving money, I mean road bikes, you have to be extra careful. By lack of stack overlap, I mean that the smaller size with all spacers is equal to or shorter than the larger size. So it's like this. This is a smaller size. Smaller size with all spacer, and the larger size are smaller. So there's no stack overlap. Usually giants come with 40 mm of spacer. So there's about 25 mm of stack overlap, because this is 15 mm, okay? And then, Right.
But
see, is it good to have stack overlap or not?
Of course, it is good to have stack overlap. You would want that adjustability. And sometimes the things become unreasonable, where the smaller size with maybe 25 spacers and the stock stem would have been better than the largest size with the shorter stem. Yeah,
Okay.
that way. Yeah.
Nice. So now, can we talk about what are the learnings that you have had in the period that
Okay.
you have been fitting?
Yeah, sure. I have been fitting from July 2023. Some people think I've been fitted for far longer, but that's
Right.
not the case. So it has been a learning curve for me, and I would like to talk about my mistakes, because if you are figuring out stuff as a fitter as well in India or outside, whatever, or or you are figuring out stuff in your own home, then you can prevent some of the mistakes I made and not hurt yourself in the process. And this was completely self-selected. I mean, I wanted to talk about it more than you said. So because I'm quite open about my mistakes. So so one of the rider was Pune based. Okay, I'll not take his name. So because without his consent, I wouldn't. So uh, I felt he had a leg length difference of like 4 or 5 and I had put a 2 or 3 shim. Okay. The point of a shim is that it goes under the cleat and between the shoe. And while it is fine, that helps you reach equally at the bottom of the stroke, because one is shorter, one is longer. You have to take equal care of whether the top of the stroke is being cleared with the shim, because a 172.5 crank will act like a 175 at the top.
Because of the shim, yeah.
Yes. And I think his femur was hitting his ASIS, anterior superior iliac spine. And he didn't let me like remove the shim or something. What happens with riders is usually something doesn't work. They come back, and or I go to their places, because Pune, I can go to the place and remove that. But he didn't let me remove the shim. And then I think he had some hip pain and some lower back pain, and then he removed the shim himself. What happened was I prescribed a 165 and then the shim, but it wasn't done in order. Meaning I didn't do it in order. I should have put the shim after the 165. Then that would create the clearance at the top of the stroke to accommodate that shim. But when you're putting a shim or something, it's not just about the bottom of the stroke. You should also have enough to clear the top of the stroke.
Right.
And if you can't ride a 175 crank, for example, I can't ride 172.5 or whatever. It creates issues. I can't ride a 170 with a 2 shim. I have to go shorter, and meaning because that creates a lot of flexion, extra flexion at the knee and the hip flexion. Some riders cannot accommodate it. And I would go as far as to say that if you can't clear it at the top of the stroke, then in most cases you are better off without the shim. Shim badly prescribed does more harm than shim well prescribed.
Right.
In the case that So one more thing is usually what I see with riders is they have an acceptable spectrum of 5 to 6 of acceptable seat height. So 2 or 3 whatever I'm putting, that would be within the spectrum of the 2 legs. If it is more than that, that's fine. If a shim is ending up at the hip, meaning if the hip is dropping and then the hip is square because of the shim, that is acceptable. If it is still dropping out of the shim and then the knee is underextending on that side which I put the shim, or plantar flexing less testosterone, I don't think it's prescribed. Meaning the effect of the shim should be usually, not always, but from my experience, end up at the hip. Meaning square pelvis is what you want on a seat. You don't want it to be dropping.
Right.
But if two angles are very slightly differently, plantar flexing or dorsiflexing, or the knees are very slightly, like if the one is obviously more than the other by 2-3 but they have a 5-6 acceptable seat height. So the amount by which it's overextending by one is overextending by more than the other is less than the amount of seat height. So and the more I fit, I try to use less shims and wedges actually. And there are some fitters who use a lot of them, but when the very best in the world, they usually are getting rid of it. It was a hyped up thing in 2010s, I think. That, okay, now you have we can make you reach the bottom of the stroke equally with both legs. But I think if what you are putting is within the margin of the seat height range, you can. So let's say the seat height is 5-6 and the leg length is 8-10 then it's worth doing. Because in that case, one of the knees would underextend or the other would overextend. Better, because this what the difference is by is more than the CI spectrum they can accommodate. So maybe 2 or 3 in them, just to bring them in a something in a spectrum that can work for both legs. But otherwise, I tend to use less wedges and shims, and I did hurt that person, so I'm sorry. But yeah, I felt that if he had come back, I could have worked with him, but he chose not to, and I respect him for that. No problem. That's yeah, his decision.
It is also the fitting process is not like once done, and it is an iterative process where you have to kind of take feedback and kind of make adjustments, right?
In a way, yes, but I suppose he was hard enough not to come back, so I respect him for that. I mean, or that he thinks that it could be that, or he thinks that it can be done in one go. So that is his take on that. I perfectly disclose that I might need 2 or 3 tries in many cases, but yeah, his expectations might be different, and it was, I think, my 5th or 6th fit, so it's okay. I think I'll like to talk about 2 more of my mistakes.
Sure.
Yeah. So this was Tejas, Tejas Dhande, with whom you might know. So he's now his athlete. He had come to Pune. I feel very sick when not only when someone is coming, but someone is coming from a reference of 2 other people I've done good with. I felt I let them down. So previously, when I used to set seat offsets, I mean saddle setback, I used to ask much more feedback from the athlete. These days I see much more and I see how they're pedaling. So in 2 cases, I think Dr. Aniket Kasodekar, who came in again, and I fixed him in the second go. And Tejas, I had got the seat offsets too far back. And what happens with those who are plantar flexing is that's fine usually if you get them very slightly back. But if they're heel droppers, meaning they pedal like very just flat feet or something, they have distal quadriceps strain usually, because if it's a bit too far back at 3 o'clock, the vector of you are not just pedaling down, you're pedaling forward if it is too far back. This is happening, and that causes some
heel drop.
Dorsiflexion happens in everyone. I'm saying for people who pedal flat, there's a vector that goes forward, and that causes some pain at the top of the kneecap, patella. So distal quadriceps strain. Yeah, and then whatever his default setup was, that was better than any intervention I did. So he was just riding like the default setup with G8s basically. Yeah, I now do seat offsets in my fits from my learning experience over 120 fits. I felt I'm better at setting seat heights than offset. So I changed my method when it was not working. I saw a pattern with 2 athletes, and I now ask for less feedback. So if they are quad dominant, for example, the level you need to push them, inherently quad dominant, I'm just not talking about cycling, the level you push, need to push a heel dropper back to get glute and hamstring engagement sometimes is unreasonable, meaning that would mess with how they're pedaling at 3. And even if disproportionate 80, 20, 70, 30, it would still not mess with the offset just to make it 50-50, because that would change the mechanics of how they're pedaling, and that can cause further issues, because bike fit isn't about perfection, it is about the best compromise. There's no as such perfect position. Brighton can feel $1 million, but it's mostly about the best possible compromise in a way.
That's interesting. Best possible compromise.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for example, if someone has a heavy body, and short femur, heavy body says go back to unweight their body, go back in the sea. But the short femur says that he can't pedal from that far back.
Right.
Or they have a long femur and they have a short upper body. The long femur says they need to go back just to not have their knees so far over the pedals. The light upper body says, the opposite, that you need the offset.
Right.
Just to, that sort of thing. So one more rider was from Bangalore. She this was quite interesting because she is like 5'1". I told her to go from 170 to 160 crank. I made about 25 shoulder crank conversions. This one was failed. So this is interesting because we sometimes tend to underestimate bioindividuality, meaning, and I might have underestimated in that case. So I told her go to 160. She didn't feel any benefit, and she's 5'1". From 170 to 160, all of the rest have been fine. Saurabh is using her crank. Saurabh, so I took her back and I gave to Saurabh, and he's 5'11". He can feel the difference between 170 to 160. She wasn't feeling any difference.
On his TT bike?
Yes. More apparent, but I mean, even in terms of pedaling, I mean, not just the hips, just the knee. Yeah. But she wasn't feeling any difference. I had got her cockpit wrong, and I also think that some people, I think. When you rotate the bar too far down and put the hood up, you decrease the reach, but the interaction from the bar to the hood is too concave. And I think that was, and I underestimated how far low and long she can ride. So I had put her to upright, it wasn't working. It was on the last day of my Bangalore visit. If I had seen her a second time, I felt it was one that I could have figured out. But I had gone back and it was too difficult to correspond over. So, yeah. But yeah, I mean, just because someone is very small, they might not feel the effects of a short attack necessarily. I mean, this was someone 5'11", could feel, a change from 170 to 160 on the Cervelo, but she couldn't feel. So never understood. So I just took it back and gave to Saurabh because she didn't feel it was worthwhile. And I also, like, if the athlete is not feeling it's worthwhile, that's what matters, not whether I feel it was right. So, I didn't get the fit right. So, more or less, I've done about 120. So apart from 4 or 5, the rest have been okay, which is okay for someone starting out in their first year, I think.
No, definitely. It's also as you go on, you are
all of these 3 people I have refunded without question. So I think that is part of the. I will look at better success ratios over time, hopefully.
Yeah, it is good that you are open about the mistakes because mistakes happen, and through mistakes is what you learn more. I
by far focus on my mistakes than what I did right, so that I don't repeat them.
Yeah,
that's what.
That is very, very important.
Yeah, and whatever methods, if they are not working, I am open to changing it completely.
Right.
Yeah. So I think what I do for seat setback, and now it has been more or less okay.
Right. Excellent. So, we talked about, your learnings and that kind of mistakes. What are some of the outstanding results that you had?
So this was, I think the most outstanding was Raj Lakshmi's feat. This was before when I started fitting. Somebody from the UK gave her my contact, and she's based in Pune. So she contacts some fitter from UK, and I will just open the review, not for boasting, but the issues she had.
Sure.
To give a background on my condition, I have scoliosis, lordosis of thoracic and cervical spine. I think she meant kyphosis of thoracic spine, and along with cervical disc bulges. And I didn't know when I started fitting her, I didn't know what these conditions meant. But through the fit, I sort of after cycling about 30,000 kilometers on my bike, with no issue, I had to stop it one day as my overtraining in 2021 led to dislocated scapula and further neck and back spasm. After my physical disability, nobody could believe I could cycle again. So, given the glaring pre-existing conditions and biomechanical issues, as there were times it was still difficult for me to walk without pain. So after that, she thanked me and physio, but it's not just on me. I think her physio also helped her a lot. And basically what I did was, in these sort of cases, I don't know what to do. So I just exhausted all X and Y options. So it took over 5-6 months. We tried all spacers, all stem angles, all stem lengths. So whatever within reason, I mean, she could, it would be a 60, but I tried 50 and 70 as well. She wouldn't definitely not need 80, definitely not a 40. Okay. All spacer, definitely not slammed. She can't ride seat height 2 mm higher or lower. So in every metric, maybe not 5 mm further forward or back, she can't slope the seat more than maybe zero point 0.5 degrees here and there. So in all the metrics, she has to be within a very narrow bandwidth.
Tight range.
Yeah, very narrow bandwidth. 165 cranks, she can't ride 170. So very narrow bandwidth. Hood, whatever, how much she's doing inwards, that also has to be within. Like if it is straight, she can't ride. But she's at a setup now. She's doing quite many. If you see the weekend kilometers of women in India, she's in the top 10 in many cases, which is because she was like, in a way, written off by doctors. So we could, I couldn't, if she were in Mumbai or Bangalore, I couldn't, I think, get her bed because she was local. I mean, I stay in Pune, 3 kilometers from my house. I used to go to her every weekend and try something new. And we figured out a setup that works relatively well for her. Maybe it's small.
Best compromise possible.
Yeah, and I don't expect her with her issues. It's more about her being able to ride a bike in very little pain than no pain. I think she has enough issues that might not actually be possible. And I'm not saying because I did it, but yeah. And those sort of outcomes I cannot deliver in one day.
Yeah.
One more. So this was when there's a guy named Sasank, okay, and this was after I had done only 10 fits in Pune and no other experience. So he had bought a bike from Huawei in Pune, which is D-Bike store. So, and he had a 10-year-old knee pain, and he has bought a Madon Technos. And the onus is on me to make it useful for him. He came, he went, okay, he said he loved the fit. I know it is not right. Meaning he will get that knee pain back again. He was complaining 2-3 days. Then I read a lot of literature. How to solve it. Then whatever. I felt the 56 Madon comes to 172.5. I felt on a 160 he could be, but I didn't have the tool then. So I said, let me bring that, we'll see. At my own risk, you don't pay for the crank, okay? He was on the limit of his budget. Whatever he paid for the Trek Madon, he didn't want to pay anything else. But he didn't, at first he didn't believe me, and I was also relatively unknown then, so I completely understand. So I said, take a refund, go somewhere else. If they can fit you with a 172.5, not in arrogance, just as a learning experience, because I don't think it can be done, given what I see. If they can fit you with a 172.5, I will get something to learn. Tell me how they did it, okay? And if you go 3-4 places, wherever you want to, please go. If they can't, then you should give us another chance, because you have to make the bike useful for yourself. So I gave him a refund. Then he went to one, they couldn't figure it out, and I think it only caused more issues. And then then he called me one day and said, going everywhere, it's costing me more than trying a 160. Because if not always, but within reason, 160 should 14.5, and then he can sell his old crank for 10.5 or something. That's only 4,000, and every fit costs 6,000. So he said, if I try 3-4 places, 24,000. He also read a lot of literature. On the day he didn't believe, but then in the 3-4 weeks he believed that cranking does solve any issues. So what his problem was, at the top of the stroke, his knee used to go from varus to valgus. What that means is swing out and in, and right knee wasn't symptomatic, left was. My point was just chop that out of your stroke. Okay, let your knee not come up that high. If it is coming here into this much flexion and going into varus to valgus, let it come up this high. You will not have any power loss. At first he thought he had power loss. Okay. Then I said, you don't pay. I have so many athletes, some guy will take a 160. I'm bringing in 52-36, very deliberate. If you don't take, I didn't think about him, okay? He thinks that, but I didn't actually bring it at my own risk. Some other TT guy would have. I knew that somebody would take, so in the long run. So I said, then he rode 70 kilometers on a 160, stack up, just to reduce hip flexion, all spaces. For the first time in his life, after flat shoes. On cleats, he still couldn't ride. And my idea was whatever is working for flat, that XY has to be replicated on the cleats. So I haven't done it because in a flat, the shoe sort of the foot separation distance and the rotation here, you figure out for yourself. And body, more often than not, self-selects what is least painful anyway. So I don't use a vertical line for foot separation distance. I try to replicate that. So got wider pedals, arch support, and yeah, fixed. Because the onus was on me to make what a Tech Mud one useful for him. If we had bought from some other store, I could have said something. But when we had bought from the bike, there's much more of an onus for me to make the bike useful for him. And he's pretty fast. Like he died at 37, 38, has some KOMs in that segment. In Pune old highway segment. And that's without training actually. So he's just 37, 38 without default at 38 years of age. So initially the onus was on me to make the bike useful for him, but now he can try at being a masters athlete, I think.
Excellent.
Yeah. Another one was this is at Velo Studio. Okay, so some guy I had a spondylitis, and he had, I think, he had bought a TT bike. Now I have to make it useful. So the first time you can't ride more than 5 minutes or 10 minutes. TT bike felt, I think it's some, I think 4-5 lakh bike. So the swimming part is fine. Bike part has to be done, and then running part. And the bike is from Velo Studio. You can't say, why didn't they ask your condition before selling your bike? The bike is all. So after that, okay. So I tried to do reasonable things. First, I set the seat back to off it. So in TT bike, the CT panels are quite steep. So usually you can't set the seat so far back that it is dysfunctional to pedal from there. In a road bike, you can, okay? Like I said, like you can start pushing forward instead of down. At least a vector goes that component of the vector. The TT bike, that's usually not the CT bike, 78, 79, 80, something like that. So I push the seat back, cockpit back, just to off it. That took him to 20, 30 minutes, okay? Then usually in TT, I want the head to drop between the shoulders, just to, get that shrug. In his case, I did not, because he has cervical spondylitis, I think. It has to be higher up. So the width was actually narrow, not for the sake of aerodynamics, but just to ride him like this and not like this. So the pads were pretty narrow, and then he went from 30-40 minutes to just 3 hours straight. And now what for every subsequent hour after 3 hours, he has to take a 5-minute break, which is taking in food on the drops and whatever water, and then he continues. So on that, he is eating wind for 5 minutes, and then basically the onus, I'm trying to take him to 6 hours. I haven't stopped with him, but we need some special equipment. With the stock bike, I've asked some people who have people with spondylitis, they were saying you can't do better. But we need some special equipment to off-weight his spine and put more in the cockpit and stuff, and maybe we can make him ride the TT, whatever, 6 to 7 hours indefinitely. Yeah.
So it is a triathlete looking at Ironman distance?
He has already done. So I think Ironman Copenhagen, 12 hours 45 in the position I set. And these days in every Ironman, I have at least more or less 2-3 clients, no matter where it is happening. Yeah. So this, and one more I like to talk. So do you know Premchand? Probably. Okay, he's Satish's friend. He's quite bulky. So that was my first custom geometry. So I tried to back calculate from whatever. He had brought me a Merida XS, I think, Sculptura. And I tried to get the X and Y with the stems and everything. And then we tried to make a stock steel bike because he's quite on the bulky side, so 105 kilos. But he's losing, he's doing well. So that was my first custom geometry, and I worked with POS to, like, I gave the numbers to POS and the bike came out fine. Like, we are no longer using unreasonable stems or anything, or chimney, I think, just to get its as stock looking fine. And he might get like 145 cranks because he has no like hip range of motion. So pretty expensive, but that also worked out fine because in a way that was my first like custom geometry bike. So
Nice. Yeah, it's actually good to see the results where when people with big problems are able to kind of overcome them, right? It's really satisfying.
in a way, it's actually equally satisfying to see people on podiums. I mean, big riders on podiums,
Right.
as these, because these are people who you have to make the bike useful for in a way. So
Yeah. So who are some of big riders that have seen good results from
all the riders are important for me. By big, we mean very fast riders. So all riders are equally important for me. Just so my first TT fit was Surya Thattu so, before his Asians, and after that it has been non-stop. But because he's known as a sprinter, but I always felt he could do very well in his TT.
Yeah, he qualified in the Asian Championship selections and
in time trial and 15 road days. So and he has very good mobility and stuff. Like he can ride both a 160 and a 165 on the TTY. For his height, that's pretty exceptional. I don't see many people 5'7" ride a 165 and not be pushed by the bike. Anyway, pedal stroke rather. So that was my first, and it worked out fine. I mean, I think third is a pretty good result given who came first. I think he could have gone very slightly strong, but that's okay. And I'm always working with him. He has my trust, and we are always trying to fine tune that position because the aim is not power or aerodynamics, it's speed. So we are always trying to bring the best combination of both. And he's from Pune, so I can go again and again and just. If it is a 5 mils up or down speed or whatever brings out the best speed for the duration, that is what we are trying. After fitting Thattu, I have fit Prajakta as well, whom you wouldn't know, but she's influential in Central India being Ironman woman. So she has a speed concept, trek speed concept, and I fit on a 150. So what happened was she had a coach. She said, you can be fit on a stock crank, why do you need a shorter one? I said, I don't do TT fits on that long for someone 5'4", so I don't see myself doing. So she was his. I said, this is with no prejudice, but you can do under him only. If you don't want to do with a 170, I don't like to do it that way. She rode with a 150 in Estonia. She thanked me after the event that she rode with a 150. Her legs were fresh after the run, for the run rather, not after the run. Yeah. After that, some of the big riders I've done was Saurabh, CVR. Emil is halfway. I mean, I've told roughly set the position. He got a 160. Now we'll probably resume. Viplab's road bike I've done, who is pretty fast. Adib was my first. Adib. So he was my first client. He was very fast under 18, and he's in Belgium now. So Yash Thorat. Onkar Khache did a very well TT segment this time, okay, on his giant TCR with clip-ons. So himself, Sudarshan I have had in, I have told him what the correct crank length is, and then I will probably continue the process. I had Manali, who has been to Asian Games, I think, for XC. I did her time trial fit, and quite a few other time trial fits. I think in the previous months, I have done as many time trial fits as road bikes, which has been surprising for me. But in a month, I get like 6-7 time trial fits itself, and so that has been surprising because there are not that many like TT or triathlon riders out there. In terms of like randomers, I'm not good at predicting if 600 kilometers into a race somebody would be comfortable. But I mean,
no one is, I think.
I guess. But Abhishek Kumar Singh, Satish Adanki, and some of the other people, yeah.
I mean, 600 kilometers into the ride, I don't
So
think
sometimes
most
they
people
say
will
that,
be comfortable.
I am 1,000 kilometer, right? And I'm having some pump in after 600 kilometers. I am not a good predictor of just seeing them then and saying whether you will have like palm pain or whatever in the last 200 or 300 or 400 kilometers after riding 600 kilometers. Like I don't know. Should you at that point yeah, what is the ideal you can do, and should you I for myself wouldn't completely expect to ride 1,000 kilometers without any pain, so no, but I never, the customer is always his expectations are set, and I think he's right, and if they are expecting, I'm trying to give my best, but sometimes yeah, with a randoner or for as long as they ride, I don't think yeah, I mean, and I think I have had slightly better success ratios with TT fits than road bike fits in a way, because I think I've done about 30 TT fits till now. I mean, TT or triathlon, just one didn't work out, the rest were fine. I think that even that would have worked out, but that guy chose not to come in second time. So, but I felt I could have figured it out, and yeah.
Yeah, so I see a common thread in terms of crank lengths. You seem to be preferring shorter crank lengths, especially for the TTs.
Yeah,
So
TT or triathlon.
how does the crank length? What is the importance of the crank length, and how does it?
I will not disclose how I choose the correct rank length or give any hints about that. But what I would say is one of the fitters I respect the most once said that, we always tend to oversimplify what cannot be simplified in a way. Things should be made as simple as possible, but not simple. So many people use angles or whatever. That assumes you have the same clearance at the hip. Two people are the same proportions, are the same range of motion. Those things are not true. Somebody, let's say, has chronomalacia, which is degeneration of the cartilage behind the kneecap, and somebody else it's just perfectly fine. Why would I set them both with the same crank length? This person can I would leave a margin for error, and I would make them do pedal a much smaller size as well. That's for the knee. For the hip, I would okay, one fitter I really respect, he said it's very interesting way of saying it. He says, I don't want the rider to be pulled at the bottom and pushed at the top. That is how he set seat heights and crank lengths. What are the markers for not being pushed at the top? I'm not going to say that, but that's a very amazing way of saying it. That means that the bike or the pedal stroke is completing itself for you. You are not completing the pedal stroke for the bike.
Right, interesting. Yeah.
So being pulled or being pushed at the top, being pulled at the bottom is very obvious. I mean, plantar flexion, if it is coming from the ankle, has to be it doesn't have to come exclusively from one joint. Could be from any combination, hip drop or just the knee overextending. Pushing from being pushed at the top, I will leave it at that. But I don't use angles at all. I use my experience, and I also very limited experience, I should say, and also just. So Rudra, for example, I think he has some signs of chronomalacia. Actually, he was riding on 72.5 or something. I leave a margin for error. I wouldn't see if he's riding 172.5 and he has some degenerative. I wouldn't try a 170. I would leave some margin for error in that case. And if he's not going any slower, let it be known. So maybe a 160. Not even a 165. If it is a degenerative condition, I would just leave some margin for error. There has been studies done on crank length and power. Okay, so I think Jim Martin and McDaniel, it usually doesn't, and you have to give it time. I don't remember anyone who has given it time and not got back the same. But it sometimes comes instantaneously. Saurabh is riding 160 just equally fast.
Right.
You have seen. So no lower power numbers. On a road bike, it sometimes leads to a power deficit, but in the long run, they get it back. Maybe it might be only that for people who have done those studies, 1 or 2 out of 3 out of 1,000 who wouldn't get back that power. Otherwise, and why is that the case? So power is torque into cadence. Is that?
Right.
So usually the cadence somewhat makes up for it, for the lack of the radius of the lever length, and the force you produce is also more. The reason force you
Cadence will be better in a shorter crank length.
expected.
Yeah.
The force you produce more is because in a shallow squat you produce more force than a deep squat. The shallow squat is the shorter crank. So when you have that much flexion, sometimes you're not able to hip or knee flexion. That sometimes you're not able to produce good enough force. So that slightly increased F and the cadence make up for the lack of R in the long run. That's one thing. Secondly, just common sense. Okay, what is the height variation or the inch variation between people? 20%, 5 to 6'4". That is what bikes are made for. Not for kids. I'm not talking about. Okay, roughly 5 to 6'5". That is about 20% variation. Okay, 170 to 175, I think is 3%. I don't think you need a proportionate range of motion, but I do think you need a range of motion within the reason. Meaning, it is true that shorter riders can ride disproportionately longer cranks. Okay, you don't need to go 20% over. So I think 165 to 175 is 6%, and then 160 to 175 would be around 10. Okay, whatever. So you're not covering that 20%. So in a way, you are saying the shorter rider to ride disproportionately longer crank, which is fine. But they should be riding a 160. If a bike 5251 Canyon 3XS or a LA 44 or whatever, it should be equipped with a 160 in my opinion. Not a 165, not a 170. Then maybe the 54, 55. Even then maybe a one. Yeah, there's no 162.5. Yeah, I would err on the side of short, if at all. You can ride a crank. So if you have symptoms at, let's say 172.5, I can ride 165, 167.5. I wouldn't ride a 160, but 170 might be cutting it too close to the margin, whatever symptoms you have. So I will leave a margin for that. Pogacar is riding 165, but I don't, I'm not a fan of like shorting crank just without any reason or just for the sake of it. I think Shimano is actually making 155, 105 right now. Okay, and they will just come out. But the reason in 105 is because I think Roder, Cobb, and Appleman already make up to 140. In I've used 145. Okay, but and those are Altegra equivalent. So you already have options. If you don't have Altegra, for people who are willing to spend as much as Altegra, that. But if you want to spend as much as 105, you don't have options. And some of the 3-4 lakh bikes are 105, and they don't want to spend 35,000 on a crank. So yeah, I think Shimano is rolling out with so what happened was they were making a 160 and they didn't expect the demand. It's stocked out everywhere except Singapore, Japan, and I think Thailand or Malaysia. Everywhere else it's stocked out because it's actually good. And yeah, Shimano didn't think so many people will need it. So they
especially I think when a couple of articles came out about Pogacar using 165. That also, would have some effect.
Yeah, and Pogacar also uses yellow cleats. He doesn't use black cleats. Just for. But about cleats, okay. If I'll come
yellow
to that.
cleats is like 6 degree.
Blue is 2 and black. I'll come to that at the end. I think that would be better. But I think a feed shouldn't just be based on this right size bike. It should also be based on pedaling the right size circle. Both are equally important. So I would, yeah, I think crank length is equally important. And I have over time actually simplified my fits from foot correction, wedging, all of that nonsense. And not nonsense, but less important things on crank length. And I put more focus on crank length in my fits. Yeah.
Nice. So where do you see the future of fitting go, in India go, and for you as well?
I mean, for myself, I would like to, fit some more of the fast riders in around I have fit some of the CBR riders, some of the, Pune, fast riders, Pune and Mumbai. But I would like to fit some more of the fastest riders in India. Some of them like to fit themselves, and I completely respect that. They are very good fitters in their own right. And but some of the guys who don't like to fit themselves rely on others. I would like to fit some of them. And the thing about fitting, in 2-3 riders, fast riders around Asia is it's on a travel. And I get nervous when they're not local. Because doing these things in one go is a bit risky. Okay, I can refund them and they can go to the default, but there's no taking away from how much it costs to travel and accommodation and all of that, and that might go to waste if so. I would only welcome someone like that in once I go to that standard where I'm working at a 98-99% success ratio, that I'm more than reasonably certain that I will get it right, and I'm not there yet. So it's around 92, 93, 94. So once I get to 98-99% success ratio, only then will I welcome someone like that in. And I guess both feed off each other. Only then would that those riders contact me anyway. So not at this level, not at a level where an Asian rider would come to me. In terms of fitting in India, I think I'm not a big fan of motion capture system, but I think there is a value to saddle pressure mapping and foot pressure mapping. But those things cost 7 lakhs, and I think foot pressure mapping costs 6 lakhs.
Wow.
Yeah, and my fits are like on the more expensive side in India, and I find it not affordable. So that equipment would help, but I don't think I would do any better with the saddle pressure mapping. I would do a lot better with saddle pressure mapping, but not with the motion capture system, because I think one big fitter said that if a hip is dropping right or a knee is overextending and you don't know how to see that, then you should teach yourself to see that. You shouldn't rely on dots to see that.
Right.
And I try to do it that way.
Yeah. Excellent.
I also believe like India can catch up in terms of, even without the equipment, in terms of coaching. I mean, Chinmay, NJ is of course doing, Arvind is doing, and some people to world class status much before the athletes actually, because that's more intellectual, I think. For racing, you think you need roads, you need very good food, you need accessibility. India is a poor country, so there might be many hidden talents who just can't buy a road bike. Yeah, so just inherent talents,
Right.
who just can't buy a road bike. But in terms of coaching and fitting, I think India can go to a higher standard much quicker than yeah.
Excellent. So, it's been fantastic conversation.
Yeah, thanks.
So, to kind of conclude the session, what would be some of the things that someone who is not able to go to a bike fitter, or they are in some tier 2, tier 3 cities,
Yes.
where they don't have access to a good fitter. So what are the small things that they can look at and say arrive at a reasonable fit for themselves?
I would say that Neil Stanbury has already done a video on this. I mean, on Cam Nichols's channel. But for just to start with, I think you should set the cleat. So if you are small, let's say, I mean, foot is small, 40 UK or something, maybe 8-9 millimeter behind the center of the cleat. So the spindle 8-9 millimeter, there is a mark there, okay, on a Shimano cleat or a low cleat. First, don't start with a cleat without any float. So in blue Shimano will struggle. Blue Shimano is for fitters and for riders who have been riding for some time. Start with the low gray is also okay, 4 degrees, 4.5. Only in one case did I not find it enough, but low gray, which is what comes in the box with the pedal, and the Shimano yellow anyway with the pedal. Yeah, don't change that. Set the center of the cleat line somewhere around 9 mm, 10 mm behind the center of the first of the metatarsal. Okay, don't set it according to the shoe. All the holes in the shoe are forward, backward, whatever. Yeah, meaning from shoe to shoe. Okay, don't bother. It's it matters where you set according to the feet. So for a small rider, maybe 9-10 mm. For a large rider, so across the spectrum, maybe 47, 48, maybe 15. And maybe if you are 42, UK, very average length feet, maybe 11, 12 mm. So around the spectrum, from 9 to 15 mm, go there. Okay. Setting rotation is a bit tricky, because what you want is, if you have 6 degrees of float, you want the cleat rotation to be neutral, so that you are not hitting the stops. Okay. But there is a catch to that. I will come to it. If for a starter, you can just set it straight. Okay, but if someone really wants to sit like that, that is a problem. But for a starter, if they have like 1 degree of either 1 degree this side and maybe 2 degrees that side, that usually leaves a margin of error because you still have 3 degrees of float or whatever. People don't usually need more than three. So setting it straight, they wouldn't run out of the stops usually unless they are very duck feet or very pigeon toed. Okay, set the cleats that far back and set it straight. Okay, after that, in terms of seat height, just set it under where you start to feel choppy in zone 4, 70 to 75 RPM. And by chopping, I mean go up for 3, 4, 5 millimeter increments and just the last iteration. So let's say I feel choppy at what is my seat at 68.5. So I start to feel choppy at 68.9 or 70. What am I saying? 68.9 or 69, something around that. So just under that, maybe just. But I would also say that within the seat height methods, there has been an emphasis of setting it under overextension. This is setting it under overextension. 75, 70 RPM zone 4, you are feeling choppy, meaning you are losing control of the bottom of the stroke. This is setting it under overextension. If I feel choppy at 68.9, I'm setting it 68.5, then I'm setting it under overextension. I don't think there has been enough focus on setting it over under extension. Some people don't have a seat height spectrum to work with. I've seen one or two. And in those cases, I use stick, which I can't say here, but meaning where they start to underextend overlaps where they start to overextend. This is actually higher, so they don't have a seat height spectrum to work with. But for a starting point, setting it under overextension is not very, but if you still have anterior knee pain, I would still let it overextend very slightly. Meaning, if at 68.5, I am having some patellar tendon issues, just pain over the kneecap, below the kneecap, on the kneecap, under the kneecap, I will still set it at 68.9 and let it very slightly under overextend. If I let it overextend beyond reason, okay, 70, 71, then I will have posterior chain issues. Pain in the gastrocsoleus or Achilles tendon or probably biceps femoris just behind the knee or something. So you have to be very careful. But once you get there, you can experiment within the plus minus 3-4 mm range and find a sweet spot. I also am not very strict about the seat height I set. I correspond with riders, then I say 3-4 mm higher or lower, because you never know on the day. Like if someone drives 6 hours to see me, will their spine be like they are fresh out of bed when they ride? No, it's a crooked spine question mark. So the reach will be much less after driving because it's a crooked spine rather than. So I do correspond with that. I'm not very strict on the setup. I have done 125. I've not gotten a seat height wrong beyond 5-6 mm. So meaning that whatever issues they have, I shouldn't say whatever issues they have, that didn't get elevated after a 5-6 mm reduction or increase, informed increase or reduction. Yes, usually they are within 3-4 mm. In 1 or 2 cases, they have been 1 or 2 cases only. That's the seat height. In the offset, a neo pedal spindle is a starting point. I don't like to use that. Like as a starting point, it's okay.
Neo, I mean, starting.
If you can't do anything else, I can't make you use my eyes of 120 feet. So as a starting point, you can go neo or pedal spindle. If you're very light in the upper body, maybe go 5-10 mm longer and see. If you don't have anterior knee pain, it should be okay. And as you go forward, you should also go higher to maintain the same radius to the bottom bracket. Right. Seat height isn't a plane to the, it's a radius to the bottom bracket. So you want to maintain the same extension to the bottom. So for every X mm further forward you go up X by 3. So maybe 10 mm forward and 3 higher to maintain the same. Go back 10 mm, then maybe it'll go by 3 once you have found the same radius. cockpit, if you are feeling scapular retraction, that's usually either too short or too high. And if it's protraction, then it's too far away. So probably, or bent elbows. Bent elbows can also happen for another reason. But otherwise, it's just too far away. Possibly too low as well.
Locked elbows.
Just locked elbows. I see some people with locked elbows because they don't suspend themselves on the core. Okay, they don't sit like this, but they brace themselves on the bar. That is a completely separate issue. That takes days of training just to sit on the bike in the reasonable way.
Right.
Handlebar with just distal parts of the acromion is not a bad way to start. Whatever bikes come with, usually not always are 2 centimeters too wide. I mean, very possibly, but just measure the distal part of I use a different method, but for a tier 2 triathletes, as you said, distal part of the acromion, and with hood angle rotation, I would actually have it slightly, because anatomically when you raise it, you don't raise it very vertically, you have slightly, not without reason. Also, after all of this, if you have anterior knee issues, and setting it very slightly highly as well, from the method I said, you should try crank length. And leave a margin for error. Try 5, 7.5, 10 shorter. Don't try 2.5 shorter. That would be my recommendation. So what did I, for foot separation, I would say that see what you're riding with flat and try to replicate that. I wouldn't go with a vertical line unnecessarily.
What do you mean?
I would vertical, some take from tibial to paracet the second metatarsal joint, which is okay. The ray in front of the knee. I would rather go sometimes by, not always, but sometimes by where the foot wants to self-gravitate, just on a shoe. And if it is sitting wider than a usual pedal, then I think SQ Labs has a +18, +15.
Right.
Altegra has a +4.
At that point, I think someone has to, someone would be doing better with taking help of someone like you as a bike fitter. But the major things, I think, like saddle height,
seat height, seat offset, handlebar reach, handlebar drop. If you can put 3 marks, then 140 degrees of knee extension, 141, 140, something around that isn't too bad, but it doesn't work for everyone. But if you put a dot on the greater trochanter, lateral condyle, and lateral malleolus, that is where they put, and they see that at the bottom of the stroke, it's about 141, 142 degrees, and some apps get you there. It's not a very bad extension to have. Like it would also not be usually with beyond 5 millimeters, so you can self-correct from there.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. This has been a fantastic, conversation, Ronit. At times it went a little technical for some, but that it is with the territory. In the terms, where, especially in the first part where we talked about front of the bottom bracket and behind the bottom bracket, but it's been excellent examples of how important the bike fit is, how people benefit from bike fit and stuff. And I think in terms of bike fitting, we are nascent. Not many people are there. But now, seeing people like you coming and, filling that gap is very good to see.
Yeah, I'm trying. And I also say that if you're trying for a bike fitter, you should first give a chance to someone who's local, because they can see you again and again. Like, I think I have a name, but if you are, there have been 3-4 people from Goa who have called me, I've always sent them to Chinmay. Because he can see him again, and that much travel cost, and, I can see them only once. There is value to seeing them again. So I've always, and they have always been, between my travel visits to Bangalore, there had one guy who had called me and said, I cannot wait. I said, go to Crank, and he was very happy. No problem at all. And you should, there is value to, fitting under someone who is local. That is why I try to reach you. If they are not solving the issue, then you can travel. But try to exhaust someone local, and if he is well in good manner, then you can go for revisits as well. After that, if you have given enough chances, then you can try somewhere else. But they will also learn the trade much better, and that way. I had someone from Chennai said, "You shouldn't come to me. Go to Srivatsan." He was very happy. So I might have only done as good of it, not better. No one knows. So that much travel cost is not usually, but if they are exhausted out of options and from other cities, I still try to do it online, and after that only do I ask them to come. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, sure. Pleasure being here. Bye.
That was my conversation with Ronit. I hope you enjoyed that. If you are enjoying these podcasts and are finding them useful, please consider supporting the podcast by subscribing to it on YouTube as well as on your favorite podcasting app. It really helps. Thanks again for your continuous support. See you next week with another guest.